Yeah, you're not just, so,
Lives in Avon.
and I was like, well, I don't know, he's like, I'm really good with like the,
Oh, yes.
is it CAD? For design, but he's like, I was like, coming up with ideas, I'm like, you're a senior in high school, like, maybe in high school,
His wife is-
engineering class.
Yeah.
That comes with time.
She's funny.
I said, well, you're really good, he's a good one.
She's great people. He's a Detroit guy.
It's
from Detroit. It looks really good.
And then Jacob's just.
Yes, that's why they sent me to him.
He saved me, Paul, he really did, I'm so thankful.
Unless maybe you guys are probably.
So the first guy who just screwed up.
It was my best friend's kid.
I remember talking.
They all set.
33 years. Last night.
Yeah.
We didn't want bad days, I guess.
Sure.
Why me?
Yeah.
When a person is 90 years old.
I'd like to call to order the City of North Ridgeville Planning Commission meeting for Tuesday, February 8th. Everyone please stand for. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Secretary, please call roll.
Members of the board. Ali,
Present.
Grotman,
Present.
Swallow,
Present.
Edens,
Present.
Smolik,
Here.
members of the administration. Sean Kelleher
Here.
and Kimberly Lieber. Here.
Okay, next on the agenda is election of officers. We have chairman, vice chairman, secretary, liaison, the Board of Zoning and Building Appeals, and alternate to liaison, the Board of Building Appeals. First, we'll start with chairman. Do we have any nominations for chairman?
I would nominate Jim Smolik.
A second.
Okay. Do we have any other nominations? Okay, I will close nominations for chairman. Do we have any nominations for vice chairman? I'd like to nominate Jen Swallows.
A second.
Do we have any other further nominations for vice chair? At this time, I will close nominations for vice chair. Do I have any, now we're gonna go to secretary. Do I have any nominations for secretary? I nominate Tina.
I'll second.
Okay. Is there any other nominations for secretary? At this time, I will close nominations to secretary. Next is liaison to Board of Zoning and Building Appeals. Do I have any nominations for that?
I nominate Steve Lane.
I'll second.
Do I have any other additional nominations for liaison to Board of Zoning and Building Appeals? Okay, at this time, I will close that. Now we'll do alternate. Do I have any nominations for alternate? I'll nominate myself as the alternate.
I'll second that.
Okay. At this time, we'll just do a vote for all of those positions since there was no one running against any of them. So the roll will be approval of all the nominations with the acceptance. Madam Secretary, please call roll.
Ali,
Yes.
Grotman,
Yes.
Swallow,
Yes.
Edens,
Yes.
Smolik.
Yes.
And everything else.
Okay. Next, did everyone get a chance to review the meeting minutes from our last meeting, which was December 14th, 2021? Is there any corrections at this time? Okay, those minutes shall stand and be filed. Madam Secretary, is there any correspondence?
No correspondence.
Okay. There's no old business. At this time, we have new business. I'd like to introduce Kimberly Lieber. She is the Planning and Economic Development Director. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to take a few minutes to introduce myself and to share a bit about some of the projects I'll be working on coming up and some of the ways we can collaborate together. So I'm Kim Lieber, Director of Planning and Economic Development. My background is in planning and also community economic development. I've been in planning over 20 years, but most recently 18 years with the city of North Olmsted as their planning and various titles, but planning and development director in that community. Part of my responsibility there was staffing various city boards and commissions. So I staffed the Planning and Design Commission. They also have a PCBA, another community with all the letters that, you know, the alphabet soup. Their Landmarks Commission and Arts Commission as well. So I have some history of working with these volunteer boards and understand and really appreciate the work you do for the community. So in terms of moving ahead, some of the things I've been tasked to do will definitely involve the Planning Commission. So our master plan for our community has been out of date. The last time it was adopted was in 2009. So it is time to begin that process to update. You know, I guess you can look at it on the bright side that if we had gone through this process 2 years ago, so much has changed in the world, you know, in the economy and land use and you know, so many things in the world since the pandemic. So perhaps with some fresh census data and a fresh set of eyes about how the world has changed, this is a great time to really dig in and to think about the future for Ridgeville in this new context that we're living in. So I think maybe it worked out to delay that process until now. So we'll get that process started a little bit later in the year. But before then, you might be familiar that the city is wrapping up a branding process. So are you familiar? Is this no? Okay. Well, it began last year. My understanding. I started my first day with City of North Ridgeville was January 7th. So I'm a month old. So I'm still learning. And I know since you didn't have your January meeting, so some of this information might be coming to you late as well. But the city has engaged a firm called Guide Studio to work with a committee of city and stakeholders around creating a city brand. Really, you know, a lot of people think about it as logo creation, but I think the city thinks of it more as identity creation to use for not just physical things like gateway signs and you know, letterhead and stationery and business cards, but also as a marketing and economic development tool to create strategies for communication within the community and our business community. So that process had already been underway when I got here. There's again that committee that's working to refine some concepts, and then I mentioned this in the context of planning because there was a community survey that was put out in December that went through some, I think, first week or so in January. That asked the community to reflect a bit on the personality of North Ridgeville and some points of pride and things that we'd want this brand to express. And I think North Ridgeville, of all the client communities of this consultant, had the highest level of participation that they had experienced ever. I think over 1,000, I think over 1,300 respondents. And a survey put out during the holiday period, also during pandemic. So I think that speaks volumes for just how people were paying attention and like tuned in to like the questions being asked. So so while branding might not be directly planning commission related, I think that the feedback that we got during that survey process said a lot about priorities of the community and the positive opportunities to capitalize on. So I think some of that feedback solicited, I think, could be very useful as we start into some of these other planning initiatives in the community to help use that information and also that identity to create energy and excitement and enthusiasm for getting involved in some of these projects as, you know, both residents and our businesses. So I wanted to mention that. I've spent some time reflecting on some of your existing planning documents, not just the master plan, but there's a park and rec plan that was done in 2013, I believe, and There's some effort to look at, one of the recommendations of the master plan was around a town center. So that probably sounds a bit familiar to you because you're in the middle of it, sitting here in the City Hall complex, this 8-3 between Bainbridge and Center Ridge area of opportunity where city owns property, schools own property, and now with Center Ridge complete, there's certainly potential and opportunity that we can look into in greater detail. So that's one of the projects I'll be working on, is starting to convene community conversations around this to advance, like, what could this area look like, to continue conversations with developers so that we know that as we plan that those ideas are grounded in something real that could happen, not just something aspirational that can never occur, but how can we see this area develop? And so, there'll be a number of conversations and public meetings, and certainly like the planning commission to be involved and help promote and if needed, maybe help facilitate if we have, the ability to be in the community and your groups and organizations to talk about it in your, with your neighbors or the places that you visit in the community. So that's going to be probably going a little bit quicker than the full master plan update. Master plans can take, a year or so, depending on the volume of information and the number of meetings and outreach you do. But I think that there's a little bit more urgency about, the town center and the opportunities that are here today that, I know the schools have property that's involved in this area, and they're going to have a levy coming up, and they're going to be facing questions about what to do with some of their land and assets. So we certainly want to start talking about what some of these opportunities might be. They'll certainly be getting those questions as well. So I think it's super exciting. North Ridgeville is a community with incredible opportunity with growth. And I think we have the ability to start helping nudge it more in the right direction by looking at some of our outreach businesses, some of our codes, some of our processes, how, the full gamut. So I'm really excited to dig in. So I've already started looking a bit at the city zoning code and looking for areas of opportunity there. There are many. So I think that we can tackle, Tina and I have already started discussing on the process side, like how we can maybe look at updating our applications. Like once this branding process is done, how can we update, maybe simplify the application process, continue the work of staff review, meeting with applicants ahead of planning commission meetings, but how can we, how can we streamline whatever process to get applicants here and have their plans in really good shape so that when the planning commission is reviewing, you have good staff reports in front of you, you have all the information you need, the applicant's prepared to answer the questions that might come up. So trying to do that work ahead of time that makes these meetings more productive and less frustrating. I'm not saying that they are frustrating now. I'm just saying, in my experience, doing all that work up front helps things during a meeting, especially as we start heading down the territory of potential rezoning applications or initiatives where there's going to be a ton of community interest to make those processes as streamlined and work as well as they can. So we're looking at some of those, that code language now. We'll certainly be diving into district regulations. So what are the districts? Where are the districts? Some of the things I've noted were the super specificity of uses, of your permitted uses, that is wow, way so specific, egg store, so I think there's ways of simplifying some of the code language to make it a little easier to interpret, maybe more specific in some areas that need more help and less specific in some areas that might feel a little too much like handcuffs right now. Maybe looking at, are there any districts where certain types of design standards are desired or warranted? And if so, can we spell those out rather than just have nebulous statements of things that we want? How do we help use zoning as a tool to create the community that we want it to be? So I'm excited to look in those things. Signage, I think there's a lot of clarity that can come in the sign code. Even just today, Tina and I were fielding a question from an applicant where it took several goes around to try and come up with the right answer. I think there's, we need to consider, some recent court decisions and making sure that our code is constitutional, can be defended, but also is creating the aesthetic environment that we want in the city. So that would be probably a big project, would be to tackle a sign code update. And then also, I guess, something I've heard in the community, even since before I took this position, was just the growth management. Like with so much residential development, are we getting to some tipping point where there's too much residential and there's not enough industrial commercial office to balance out in order to have adequate tax revenue and support to provide the services to the residents. So, one way of doing that will be through the master plan. We'll be creating a specific future land use plan, and then there'll be some difficult discussions to be had about proactive rezoning versus, reactive rezoning. But, if we don't kind of start to work towards some of these ideas and changes, we're just going to continue to keep seeing the types of development we have. So when we see your zoning map, there's a lot of white. So sure, you're used to looking at that zoning map, and all that white is R1 zoning. And that's a lot, so it's a lot. And if we want to attract business and industry, we need to identify those best places and think about how we can encourage, attract, and use our regulatory tools to do those things. So those are all the things I'm thinking about currently, and I'm meeting new people every day and thinking more things. But I'm really will enjoy working with this group, because I know you have planning at the front of your brain, and sometimes I get involved in the minutia of the day-to-day, and your job will help keep me on track, plugging forward to ensure that we get these projects done and we move forward, and that that's the best resource of reaching out to the community and helping me understand the temperature of residents and the feedback that the community is helping to filter, that feedback that the community is going to give through this process too. So hope you're ready to work, because I think I'll be asking some additional time in your meetings and maybe some subcommittees and other kinds of involvement as we kick off some of these projects. So that's my ramble. I'm happy to answer questions you have or talk about any subjects you want to talk about, planning related or otherwise. Otherwise, I just look forward to getting to know all of you and what your specific interests are, and how you see your skill set can kind of help fit into some of these projects.
I am so excited that you're here. I think this is my 5th or 6th year on planning commission. But my day job, I'm an assistant law director in the city of Lakewood. Sean Langer speaks very highly of you. He's the one that actually told me that Ridgeville had hired a planning economic development director. I staff planning commission in Lakewood. I deal with a lot of our economic development loan agreements and those projects and things. And I feel like the position that you're in is long overdue to be brought here. And I'm just very excited that you're here.
Thank you so much.
I just want to say welcome, and it's something that we definitely need. We need to get more small businesses in the city, anchors, and get the ball rolling.
Right.
So whatever we can do to help, we're on your side.
Right.
Get things together.
And speaking of the ball rolling, one of your challenges will be getting North Ridgeville to start to accept mixed developments.
Yes.
It's in our charter that it's not allowed. Somehow or other we have to get that resolved.
Yes.
Because I know that's what's holding up this development here.
Yes, and that's a challenge, and there's ways, I guess, that we could think about it. One is try to change the charter is one route, which could be very difficult.
Tried it already.
Right, or let's just say modify it. There might be a way of modifying that's more palatable than eliminating that provision. We did that in our homestead where we modified, and we had a very similar must go to a vote, anything with multifamily. and we modified, and we got a charter amendment passed where anything rezoned to the pure multifamily district still needed a vote, but if it was part of a mixed use or senior, then it didn't need it, and the voters went for it, and I was surprised, because I know people like voting on their multifamily. I'm not saying it will work here, I'm saying we can talk about the pros and cons of different strategies. The other strategy is leave the charter alone and just come up with a plan and a project that goes to the voters, and you just accept that from day one. So you need to kind of consider in your mind as you design a plan and work with the developer, what could or might not happen. There's risk of that too, you know, so that there's no set path at this point, and that's where all the brains together, working together, hopefully will lead us to seeing something really good happen here, whether it be through an amendment or through a vote for a particular rezoning, and we'll figure that out.
So, Kim, I know one thing that seems like in the past, we really weren't sure what the administration thought of items. We're sort of like on our own little island here. We have no idea what they're thinking. So I assume you're gonna be the bridge between the planning commission and administration, sort of like, I know like on some stuff in the past, we've had CT consultants who write a recommendation memo thinking that, you know, the proposed development meets city code. So I assume those correspondence will be coming from you from here on out.
Yes, I definitely would like to implement staff reports. I think they're really helpful to include in member packets when you get them, so that if there's any issues that the administration cued in on from the beginning, that you know what they are. So that's not to say that the mayor or other members of the administration will ever just weigh in on their own, but I'm hoping that I do become that bridge, and that over time it's that trust develops, and other members of the administration can be less involved, and I can step into those shoes and understand the zoning and the development and kind of what the concerns of the commission might be, and help guide the applicant really from day one to try to come through what those project issues might be. So I think group meetings with staff and applicants is great, but you also have to know, like, well, who's the one person, not like there's 5 departments of people you gotta all talk to, but like who's the person that's gonna lead you from you have an idea for a project to submitting for your permit and getting your permit to start the project. So I functioned in that role before, I'm comfortable with that role. I hope I get to that point again. So that would be my intent, is to work towards that.
And I'm sure Guy will thank you right now. There's that person.
No, I mean, it truly is a team effort, but I'm a big fan of making it super easy for applicants to know, like, all right, who do I need to talk to, or give me who do I get direction from? Not like, well, you told me it was fine, and this person told me it wasn't, and then that person, like, I hope to be the clearinghouse or the bringer together of all of those comments and people into that one point.
Perfect. Does anybody else have any other questions or comments? Well, thank you, Kim. Like Jen works in municipality, I work for the city of Westlake, engineering department. So we have a real strong planning department under Bob Perry and Jim Bedell. We're the only city with a red roof in that doesn't have a red roof, so I totally get it. So planning, even though I'm in engineering, planning still beat down on us through Merritt Clough. So yeah, I think this is going to be exciting for the city, and especially with the economic development portion as well. So because right now all it is residential, and it's good for the schools, not good for municipalities though.
Right. And the schools, I'm sure, would like a respite, and also more tax base to help support some of the things that they're looking to do as well, so.
All right, well, thank you.
Sean, did you have a question?
Yes, I wanted to ask if you thought the Browns should draft a quarterback. I didn't say anything. Answer any questions.
I don't know that any draft in the world could help at some point, but you never know, there's always next year.
That's true Cleveland.
I was gonna say, she's a true Clevelander. There's always next year.
Yes.
But all joking aside, Kim, in this city, a business has been over almost 15 years. And moved my family here 6 years ago. And other than goodwill, you can't buy a pair of shoes or jeans in the city. Pizza, car washes, car parts. So we gotta figure out how to draw and lure these other businesses, some chains, some anchor businesses, you know,
Right.
in our city somehow.
Well, and that's one of, yeah, the unintended consequences of not having a planning department.
Yep.
Is that it's left up to the developers to decide where they want to come in and what they want to do. And it just, you know, puts the city in a position to either accept what the proposal is, you know, there's no like you were saying, those steps in the beginning to talk it through with the developer and, okay, we can see this maybe getting approved, or what do you think about this, and having some of those influences that you just don't have without, you know, that person in that role.
I know, you know, Mayor Corcoran's been very involved. My understanding is with meeting with developers and property owners contemplating development ahead of time. I don't know how it was with past administration surveyors. But I know, you know, one of his charges definitely has been to look for these economic development opportunities, to look for these areas that we should be targeting, to start the conversations with the development community. And on my end, I look at, you know, zoning as like the tool that if your zoning kind of allows a hodgepodge of things everywhere, you might get a hodgepodge of things everywhere. So like that's the most powerful land use tool you have at your disposal. So if you create your map and your code in your districts, the way you envision your city, it will be part of what can help cause that. I mean, you still need to do the business attraction, you still need to have incentives and other tools, but it'll be filtering through this code that's designed to result in the thing that you want. So I think we can look at a bunch of different ways to move forward, both on the economic development side and on the planning and zoning side.
And I'll say this, you're gonna have to be moving fast, because from what I've seen from the real estate transactions, there's a lot of property being bought by developers and commercial folks that are presently have houses on them. Center Ridge, also on the corner of Route and Lorraine. So
Right.
you're gonna have to be running real fast in order to catch up to whatever.
Right, that is the challenge of trying to update as you're also trying to work with applicants. And as we know, zoning is purposefully rezoning or zoning amendments are purposefully a slow process. It's like it's meant to protect property rights, not just of the person who's, you know, the property who's being changed, but the surrounding property owners. So there's no such thing as a quick rezoning or a quick zoning code up. You know, it's not like a building code or a, you know, you know, your administrative code where you can take it to council in one meeting, boom. Like it's not built that way. So yes, speed is important, and unfortunately, it's not like a thing that's designed for speed. So we just have to be diligent, and maybe as a group we can prioritize, because you know better than I, what are the areas that you've seen the most change in, or what are the districts you use the most that you run across problems with, and like rather than try and tackle the whole code top to bottom at once, maybe we focus on some of those districts where we're seeing the most growth and change and try and tackle them first. Understand that making a project bigger will keep getting longer. So what can we make any targeted changes? So I guess I'd ask, you know, think about just in your experience on planning commission, like where are the areas in town where you've seen the most growth and change, and where you think the code is not as well suited to deal with it as you might have hoped from your seats at least.
I know one is Meadow Lakes is what PCU. Yeah, just get rid of that altogether.
The thing
Yeah,
is, Meadow Lakes is almost done. So
I know, but that code, yeah, that's one I would drastically look at. I mean, basically, when something comes to planning commission, you know, that our hands are tied. It's based off of a preliminary development plan that was approved like 15 years ago. And yeah, there's nothing we could do, and the density is always an issue. And
you're losing track of time 20 years ago.
oh yeah, true, right, yeah. So that would be one thing I would definitely look at.
This is a pretty elementary question, but if we're talking about, is that Center Ridge out here? Okay, so if we're talking about Center Ridge and there's a business owner or a house, let's say there's a house, and we rezone it as a business district, would they expect to see like a diminution in their value because there's less people they can sell it to? Or would the value maybe go up because a business wants to locate where that house used to be? Is there a simple answer for that or no?
Well, I'm sure it's dependent on the particular location, also the size of the property and what's around it. So if it's like a house that was zoned residential, but it's surrounded by other commercial and you rezone it to commercial, it's probably helping it, increase in value. Because a developer, otherwise you can only sell it for a house, it can only be used as a house. And the attractiveness of it remaining as a house is reduced as things around it might continue to turn commercial. But a challenge you always have too is you could rezone residential parcels that might be on a main thoroughfare and make sense to rezone, but each one of those parcels is maybe too small to accommodate what type of commercial development might be permitted in the district. So the developer might have to purchase multiple properties in order to create the land area needed for that project. But if in the meantime, it can continue as a non-conforming use, it can still be used as a household, as a house, be a house forever, and it could be kept up. You might not be able to make a big addition to it without a variance, or you might, if it burned down, you might not be able to rebuild it without variance. But it's still, you could still continue to use it and sell it residentially. And potentially you can put some things in your code that still allow. One thing that we did in North Olmsted was in a code update, in an area that had more houses along Mooring Road, was to say that a permitted use was houses that existed at the time that the code was updated, continue to be permitted uses. So you didn't strip away, you didn't make them non-conforming. So if there's concerns about banks loaning something that's non-conforming or adding onto a non-conforming structure, like wipe that away. Only on the west end where there was more of that. Other areas of town were like, no, if those get converted, we're okay with that. It was trying to protect the people that have the house, but also allow for the redevelopment of the house to something else. So it's just, I'm sure there's other strategies. That's just one thought.
I just wondered if that's where angry residents would come in and say, hey, you're rezoning where I live, or would it be more of like a general citizenry who say, we like it the way it is, we don't want a business district there? Where does the anger and in the citizenry come from, do you think?
Well, I don't know that it's as much the people that might be on, if it's a main road like Signage, I don't know that it would be coming as much from the people on that road that's just been widened with all the traffic and the change around them, as much as the people that might be right up against them, where the person sells to the developer and they take their money and they move, but it's the people normally that are left behind or that are abutting that thing that's now changing that I've seen the most angst from.
Sodium lighting or something.
Right. And that way, and also that when you look at your code, and if you have, a district that allows all these drive-through, businesses and gas stations everywhere, and if your lighting controls aren't as good as they could be, then it creates more fear. But if you kind of look at your district regulations, you're like, okay, well, maybe gas stations and these auto-oriented things should be clustered, or maybe they should be conditional use, so it's not just permitted anywhere that's this orange color, then it can dull the roar of the fear, because it's like, okay, well, what could be located next to me, or what are the rules, what are the setbacks, what are the buffer requirements, what are the lighting requirements, what kind of protection would I have? So it's not that none of that's in your code, it's just, I think it could be better, so.
I think, from my perspective and in my experience with my other job, I think a lot of it is educating people. People, and I agree with you about the abutting property owners, those are the ones that are always the most concerned, and rightfully so. But with zoning issues, I think it's more of an educational issue, and I'm not saying anything bad about the city because it's difficult for a municipality to try to sell an idea. But when the charter amendment failed, I don't feel like people understood what was even being asked. Your average person that knows nothing about zoning, nothing about property rights, and what those uses actually mean, they they don't know what they're voting for, so they're like, no, I don't want that to change. I mean, that's like the automatic that like, let's just keep it the same. Where I think education would go a long way
I
with a lot
somewhat
of
disagree with
business.
you in that amendment. There was a large contingent who knew exactly what it was. And they, as you pointed out, they wanted to maintain their right to vote for the development. Thinking that if the development was good and a great one, then the developer would have no problem putting it to the vote to the people. Explain to them, the developer can go someplace else, with the same plan, and not have to depend on a vote.
Right.
Because they don't understand that those, the
yeah.
cost of those plans, depending on what they are, can range all the way up to $500,000, even more, depending on exactly what it is. Sugar Ridge comes to mind.
Yes,
Sugar Ridge is in my board.
with the trucks. Does anybody else have any further questions or comments? All right, well, thank you, Kim, and welcome.
I'm glad we had our friends and family night here, just
Right.
us without applicants, so.
Yeah, it was kind of nice, actually.
All right. Is there any other new business? All right, at this time, I'm going to adjourn planning commission meeting for Tuesday, February.
No gas station on the corner.
I know.
So we can't-
And then my